Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Victory Green Hour as the Philadelphia Eagles defeat the Green Bay Packers 22-10 in wild card weekend, as we await our opponent for the divisional round, which will be on Sunday at 3 p.m. at Lincoln Financial Field between the Eagles and either the Vikings or the Rams, who are about to play in about an hour and a half or so. I'm your host, LG Rell, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Connor Donald. Connor, what's up, bud?
Well, I mean, it wasn't pretty, but it's a win, and a win's a win. I'm gonna piggyback off of everything that Saquon Barkley said. It's up to the media to have an opinion, but they're gonna do a win's a win, and they're gonna do whatever it takes to win. So now, hopefully, things get better for next week. But it'll be interesting to find out who we get tonight. It could really go either way. So.
Yeah, it was. It wasn't it wasn't great, but honestly, this time of year, I don't care if it's a 3-0 win, 3-2 win, 40-0 win. As long as you get the win, it's all about surviving, and excuse me, it's all about surviving and advancing to the next round. Before we jump further into the game, as always, follow us on Twitter at Kelly Green Hour. Follow Connor on Twitter at Connor10. Follow me on Twitter at LJHero54 and follow the Eagles Pinpool Network on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook at Eagles Pinpool Network. And if you're joining us live, let us know your thoughts in the comment section on the game. Who was the player to watch? Thoughts on Jalen Hurts? As Party on Broad says, when it comes to Nakobe Dean's injury, yeah, it sucked because he's been playing really well, and when he went out, something we'll discuss, the Packers started throwing the ball to Josh Jacobs against Oren Burks, and I don't like Oren Burks on the field for a long time because he will definitely be exposed. So it doesn't matter who we face in the next round, whether it's the Aaron Jones and the Vikings, Kyron Williams and the Rams. They're gonna try to match up Oren Burks on the running back, a tight end, and they're going to take advantage of that, and that's what the Packers were able to do. But fortunately for the Eagles, 10 other players on the defense, were able to do their job, and they only held the Packers, who came in averaging about 27, 28 points a game, to 10 points. Man, this defense is really good. Now, we could say maybe the Packers are a little overrated. Like all the good teams that they played, they lost twice to the Lions, they lost twice to the Vikings, they lost to the Eagles twice now. The best team they beat was the Rams, I guess, maybe. But excuse me, yeah, it was a fast. I had mentioned on Friday that be prepared for the slow start. The Eagles were going to come out rusty. Well, they actually came out and got a turnover right away. Were able to score. Jalen started 6 for 6, and then he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn with a pass. But I'm not at all concerned about the way the passing game and the way the offense moved. They won by 2 scores. They won by 12 points. And you could obviously see that A.J. Brown was not healthy. Like, he may have been more of a decoy than anything else in the game. He had 1 catch for 10 yards, 3 targets. But I think you could have saw the limitation. We didn't see the burst, the speed, on the fake tush push play on 3rd down when Jalen threw it, excuse me, to A.J. Brown. He usually has that back end speed. He didn't have it there. I really do think that he was laboring out there, and I give A.J. a world of credit of just going out there and toughing it out and doing what he needed to do. He made a great block on Dallas Goedert's touchdown. Again, starting on the offensive side of the ball, I'm going to start with A.J. Brown. He deserves a lot of credit for being out there, toughing it out, and doing what needed to be done to help the Eagles come away with a win.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you could definitely tell that A.J. Brown and even Jalen Hurts, they just didn't seem themselves. And I mean, this was kind of to be expected with Jalen Hurts. I was fully expecting that Jalen Hurts was going to be a little rusty. Did I expect it to look maybe as bad like as it did? maybe not so much, but I guess that he didn't really have to be any better than that because, Saquon Barkley went off for over 100 yards again. The defense did their job. The defense did a ton of work, put in the work that they needed to do to make sure that, that the offense can get it together and get better in these future games. I don't know if we're going to see 100% AJ Brown at all this playoff. So I think that we have to get used to, maybe tapering our expectations as far as AJ Brown goes, because at this point, this injury is something that just needs more time off than a week, or even more than a week. Like maybe that Super Bowl rest, if we make the Super Bowl and he gets like nearly 2 weeks off, maybe that might help. But ultimately, I think that AJ Brown just kind of needs the offseason to heal this injury. So it'll be interesting to see what else AJ Brown's able to do, because if he continues to perform like he did in this game, then teams won't fall for the decoy AJ Brown. Of course, if you give the opportunity for AJ Brown to get open, he's still going to do something. He's still going to hurt you, but maybe they don't have to put as much attention his way. But I mean, it was also nice to see, the ancillary pieces, Dallas Goedert and Jahan Dotson get get those touchdowns. That was Dallas Goedert's touchdown run was just a thing of beauty. That stiff arm he just carried that guy with the stiff arm. It was such a nice touchdown. And then Jahan Dotson's like that. When you look at videos from what Jalen Hurts saw or behind Jalen Hurts, that offensive line on that specific play was unreal. He had easily 5+ seconds on that play, and he found Jahan Dotson in the back of the end zone. Pretty high stress situation. I don't know. I wasn't fully confident that, as soon as it was Jahan Dotson that it was going to be caught, but ended up making the catch. He ended up making the play in the back of the end zone. And I mean, Devontae Smith, he was good, but obviously, good, not great. AJ Brown, definitely not himself. To have those ancillary pieces step up was definitely huge for this offense.
It was, and I do think, going back to Jahan Dotson, maybe that game that he had last week, even though it was against the Giants, and it wasn't that, and it was with other backups on the offensive side of the ball, maybe that gave him some confidence to kind of just remind him that he was a first-round pick for a reason. And he's able to make plays in the NFL. So, like, it was good to see. And the one thing about that play, that touchdown pass, Jalen didn't bail out of the pocket. It seemed like he wanted to. He had some happy feet in there, but he realized, like, dude, I have so much time. He could have baked the cake back there. It was crazy how much time he had. And then the throw he made to Dotson was awesome. And I started getting worried, though, because the Eagles had 3 turnovers and only got 7 points off of them. And I was like, this is going to be like the Green Bay first game when the Packers turned the Eagles over, like, deep in their own territory twice, and they only came away with 6 points. And the Eagles were able to win that game. And I thought, you're leaving too many points on the board, on the field, and maybe the Packers are going to finally find rhythm, get going, and maybe that they'll might put on an onslaught and be able to take over the game. But they weren't. Yeah, and the Eagles defense deserves a lot of credit for that, because they, talk about a physical game. They were physical from the onset. Oren Burks tackle on Nixon on the opening kickoff. Nolan Smith had Cameron, I think his first name is Cameron Tom, the right tackle for for the Packers, who is considered one of the better tackles in the league. I mean, Nolan Smith had his way with him for a lot of the day. Had 2 sacks. His first sack, he just went inside, outside. Like, it was such using his speed. It was crazy. And, we've talked about it, how when he was the luxury pick for the Eagles, because he was the second of the first-round picks when they took Jalen Carter last year. And then people started throwing around the B word, because he wasn't producing right away. And then when you compare him to some of the other players that were picked after him, Brian Branch, Joey Porter Jr., like, there are players that of position of need for the Eagles that they could have taken, and people were like, man, maybe if they kind of shouldn't have taken Nolan Smith. But Nolan Smith is showing, like, the type of player that he was at Georgia. And if we can get that guy, like, And it's kind of been like this for the entire defense and for the entire team. Ever since the bye, he's been outstanding. And as has the entire defense, being the number one ranked defense in the league. But he deserves a lot of credit because, he put in all the work, and he did. I think this is where having Brandon Graham in the room helps you. You don't let the outside noise affect you, because Brandon Graham, obviously, when he got drafted and he didn't start off so hot, there were a lot of people saying a lot of things. Same thing was being done for Nolan Smith. He blocked out all the noise, and he just went out there, did work, and it's showing out on the field, and he has become one of the better pass rushers for the Eagles.
Yeah, definitely. He was my player to watch for this game. I basically said it was the front, front five, whoever was going to, those guys, players that were going to be focused on rushing and putting some pressure on Jordan Love and making Jordan Love make mistakes, which he definitely made a lot of them. But I mean, I did not expect Nolan Smith to have arguably his best game of his Eagles career in this spot, and in such a big spot too. Like, it was such a much needed game for Nolan Smith to just continue to build that confidence. I get it. The Packers were depleted. The Packers were absolutely, if all the injuries didn't happen to the Eagles win the game, we don't have to worry about it. But I mean, who knows? Like, every time, and this goes back to the fact of how physical the defense was. They came to play, and almost every second or third play, there was a Green Bay Packer being taken off to the sideline with some help from somebody in the training staff. That's just that is just a team that is downright physical, wanted to win, wanted to do everything in their power to be part of the big win. And I mean, I would say that this defense was far more important to this victory than the offense. It was massive, everything that they did and how good they were. The mistakes they forced, how physical they played, and none of the injuries were really dirty injuries or anything. They were just clean, good football hits, heat-seeking missile. Like Reed Blankenship caused one of the injuries in his typical fashion of just flying in there. I think he might have been the one responsible for Jaden Reed, who looked like he almost like had a broken arm or some sort of issue when he came off. Like, it just felt like every hit led to somebody going off with training staff, and that was just purely physical football, old school physical football. Hardy on Broad says Nolan Smith is kind of evolving into Hassan Reddick light. I can see it definitely. I mean, definitely Hassan Reddick light, because he's way smaller than Hassan Reddick, but he knows how to use his speed. If he did, at times it didn't seem like he knew. Earlier in the season, and then of course last season, it didn't seem like maybe necessarily he knew how to use his speed and put some of his pass rushing moves and speed to the right capabilities that it could be. And it looks like Nolan Smith is definitely starting to maximize that. He Party on Broad says, but I don't remember Reddick being nearly as good as Nolan Smith against the run. Yeah, Nolan Smith's really good against the run too, which is impressive. We tend to not have that luxury with some of our edge rushers and edge players. It feels like they're good at maybe rushing the passer, but not necessarily against the run, or it feels like they sporadically play, like, kind of like Josh Sweat. Like, that was one guy, like, if you think about that whole game, like, Josh Sweat was someone you didn't see, you didn't hear his name, you really haven't heard his name a whole lot at all over the past month at least. So it's definitely good that Nolan Smith has been able to step up in that spot, but this defense was just so impressive.
Yeah, and imagine, like, if they got any production from their top free agent pick in Bryce Huff, who played one snap. That's a waste of $51 million, $17 million a year. He's probably going to be gone, and I wouldn't shed a tear if he was. I mean, don't want to look past, obviously, the playoffs in this season, but, like, you have to think edge rusher is probably a need in the draft. Maybe right tackle just as a lane replacement. Maybe linebacker, not early because they don't draft linebackers early. Zach Bond now becomes a priority to resign because of Nakobe Dean's injury. Like, he's not going to be ready to start next year, his patellar tendon injury. It sucks for the guy too, because obviously the Eagles took him in the third round, had injury concerns coming out of Georgia. Then seems like he got nothing but injured with the Eagles, and then breakout year. I mean, he was outstanding this year. I love the way he plays. I love the way he comes downfield, attacks the running backs, attacks the Hulk and blitz. And he blew up a screenplay on the play he got injured. And he knew it right away that something bad happened, and it's very, very unfortunate that he's going to be out. And I mentioned earlier, I do not trust Oren Burks at all. I know he's a vet, but teams are going to try to isolate him on a tight end, isolate him on a linebacker or on a running back, and that could spell doom for the defense. I'm hoping that maybe they can try to get Jeremiah Trotter Jr. ready. I don't even know what linebackers are out there that they could even think about bringing in. I don't even know if they have anybody on the practice squad. So, I mean, it's gonna be iffy in the middle of the defense. We know what we have in Zach Bond. Another good game by Bond. He had an interception again. All pro Zach Bond, just doing everything for the Eagles. But in his contract just keeps going up and up and up, and how he's going to have to find a way to bring him back, because you don't want to have two new linebackers again next year. Because if Bond leaves and with Dean not being ready to start the year, like, you're going to have a brand new middle of the defense, and that can't keep. We talk about how for Jalen Hurts, how he keeps having new offensive coordinator after new offensive coordinator, the continuity is not there. Well, it seems like it's happening in the middle of the defense, like linebackers. We went from TJ Edwards and Kazir White to who the heck did we have last year? Whoever we had last year wasn't good. I can't even think off the top of my head. I know Shaq Leonard ended up coming, and he was terrible. But the linebackers last year weren't any good. And then finally you get Zach Bond. You lucked into Zach Bond being really, really good. Excuse me. And then Dean finally coming into the role that they drafted him in, and then he gets hurt. So hopefully that they're able to do something with Zach Bond. Brett Eclipse says, speaking of Zach Bond, how he was on Kelsey's new show, and he was talking about speaking to Zach Bond and how he was joking with Bond about considering his unexpected season when they do contract talks. Yeah, because Zach Bond apparently asked Howie, he's like, did you think that I was going to be this good? Like, because he thought it was a joke that like all pro was put incentive was put in there, and how he was like, F no. And he goes, just remember that when we talk about contract. So I did see that clip on Twitter. Yeah, so we'll see what happens. We don't want to look beyond this year, obviously, or beyond the playoffs. But definitely things have to be floating through Howie's mind about, all right, what do we do with this cap space? And we know he doesn't value linebackers that much, but we also thought the same thing about running backs, and they got Saquon. So, but they're definitely going to have to figure something out, because Zach Bond and Nakobe Dean together have been such a great tandem. We'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks. Hopefully we have more than one game remaining with Bond and Oren Burks, or Bond and Jeremiah Trotter Jr., whatever they decide to do at the linebacker position.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the only thing that may have been a disappointment was the missed tackles. I mean, PFF had them at 22 missed tackles. Like, that probably adds up from the bye week all the way to the end of the season, the amount of missed tackles that they had. They were still able to make plays happen, and like, they were just so physical, and it just felt like there was always someone coming in right behind them. If someone missed a tackle, they were just swarming wherever the ball was. So, and of course, we speak about our dear friend Oren Burks. He had 3 of those missed tackles. Zach Bond had 4, but Oren Burks with 3 of them, which is a 37% missed tackle rate, is huge, humongous. Like you said, it's a mismatch waiting to happen that smart teams are definitely going to take advantage of. Especially in that slot area. Like, you think about TJ Hawkinson, Aaron Jones, you think about, Cooper Kupp, Kyron Williams. You think about those types of names that are going to be playing in that same area that Oren Burks is playing in, and you just realize how dangerous that could be next week. So, like you said, all you can do is wait and see what happens throughout the week at practice, and hopefully they give an equal opportunity to everyone to get ready and be prepared to have their number called, because you don't want just one guy being that costly to your defense. You want to make sure that there's an opportunity to move on, kind of like the Bryce Huff thing, where Bryce Huff, they were able to pivot away, and they got Nolan Smith's breakout year. Like, you have to be prepared and able to pivot if somebody isn't performing. and Vic Fangio has shown throughout the year that he definitely isn't afraid to pivot away from players who just aren't performing or aren't doing what he wants to see in his defense. So San Diego 2019 reports are Dean tore his patellar tendon. This is a really bad injury and is difficult to rehab because it's susceptible to re-injury. I hated that rehab. Prayers for Nakobe. It's definitely true, and that's one of the things that worries me the most about Dean: the susceptibility to injury, and then this injury, and the susceptibility to re-injury. It's really going to be interesting to see what happens with Nakobe Dean, but it's such a broad range. It can range from 6 months to 12 months. And obviously he's an athlete, so probably closer to the 6 to 9 month range, but you can guarantee he's starting the next year on the PUP list. And how long is he going to be on the PUP list and unable to perform and play? We'll have to wait and see, but it definitely makes linebacker a priority. I don't know if it necessarily makes drafting a linebacker a priority, but it definitely makes getting Zach Bond back in the building a priority for sure. And hopefully, how we can say when nobody else wanted to give you a chance, we gave you a chance. We wanted to give you a chance, and maybe you'll give it a little hometown discount. Brett Eclipse says, is it crazy to have double-digit sack hopes for Nolan next year? I mean, what was he this year? He ended up at like 7, 8? Like
I thought it was 5.5.
Is it 5.5? Okay, well,
I'm not 100% sure, but
Josh Sweat ended up at 8. So Nolan Smith and Josh Sweat played almost he played like 90% snaps through the full season. Well, Nolan Smith only really came in as soon as Bryce Huff was out for sure. That's when his snap numbers went way up, but he did most of this on like a 50% snap count for the most part on the season.
6.5 sacks in the regular season, 2 in the postseason.
Yeah, so double digit sack hopes definitely could definitely be there. I mean, when you look at where those sacks happened, the majority of them happened coming down the backstretch of the season. So it's not crazy at all to think about that. It's definitely something that, if there's an over under out there, taking Nolan for the over is something to consider. And it'll be interesting to see what they do at the edge position anyways, because you speak about Zach Baum, but we got Josh Sweat, who's going to be a free agent. Do you really want to bring Josh Sweat back? How are you going to address it? And is Nolan going to become the focal point of your edge rush, or are you going to be able to
draft one? It wouldn't shock me if they at least make overtures towards Myles Garrett or even Max Crosby, and just to see what it would cost. Because if they can add one of those type of players to this defense, this already good defense, and again, I don't know what the cap implications would be and whatnot, but it wouldn't shock me. I mean, Howie's always doing his due diligence, and he's always calling around. He's always trying to see what he can, what he would have to give up to get something, and that would be a big get for Howie and this, Howie for the defense, and getting somebody like a Myles Garrett or a Max Crosby would only help Nolan Smith. And imagine this. Jalen Carter's already getting double teamed. If we added Myles Garrett or Max Crosby, you're going to double team that person too? How do you double team 2 guys on the defensive line? It's impossible. So that means either the defensive end's going to eat or Jalen Carter's going to eat. It would make this defensive line that much better. And then that would help the linebackers out, depending whoever they are, and then the secondary, which is already very good, and young and fast. They're just going to get better. I was talking about, Slay, I think, is a free agent. I would bring him back, not as a starter, but as the veteran presence in the in that cornerback room, and let him be the third guy. Let Quinyon Mitchell obviously starting on one side, and maybe Isaiah Rodgers or Keely Ringo on the other, with Cooper DeJean in the slot, and then you have Slay, who can be the backup to either Q or whoever the other guy is. He doesn't need to be a starter. I would love. Now, he had a really nice interception. He ran the route for the receiver on his interception yesterday. It was a really good interception by Slay, and I think having him around the team, having him around the young guys, could only help this defense.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, we've done all this talking and we haven't even talked about Kenyon Mitchell got his first interception. I mean,
I'm shocked they didn't throw a flag on Zach Bond though, because that was a pass interference.
It definitely wasn't, and I kind of think that the reason it didn't get thrown was just because they knew it wasn't a catchable ball. But it's rare that you get that,
No, well,
that in
he
your
was trying to
favor.
come back. It was
Yep.
underthrown, but he was trying to come back. They usually throw a flag on that.
Yeah, we had 9 times out of 10 they throw a flag on that, so we got lucky there. And obviously, the fumble at the beginning of the game, people are going to make out what. But I mean, you're not telling me that under a lot of those piles, a ball doesn't change
I
possession with
mean,
people being more physical.
honestly though, Nixon did have it and kind of was touched down, and then
Yeah, oh,
Trotter
definitely.
Trotter went in and stole it. So yeah,
No, definitely. In this case, it definitely wasn't that way. But this is Brett Eclipse, and I mean, LG's been saying that. I mean, LG's probably said this not 40 times because that would make our shows very boring, but he said at least 5 or 10 times. This is the 40th time I'm saying this in the season, but I owe a massive apology to Fangio and severely underestimate how great him and his scheme are. We agree, definitely,
at the beginning
absolutely.
of the year, I said that he was out of touch and his old school ways weren't going to work, and I was definitely wrong, and I'm glad I was wrong.
And now you see everything breaking down in Miami, and you can see Vic Fangio wasn't the issue. The players and the culture there seem to be the issue. And because a lot of players, like I guess some people were nervous because a lot of Miami players were like, "Oh, he's not a good defensive coordinator. He's not good for his players." Blah 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 blah. And then, like Brett Eclipse said, Miami must be a truly pathetic franchise to oust him and have their players whine about him like that just to see him do this the next year. I mean, Miami's crumbling. I'm semi surprised that they brought McDaniel back because it feels like his culture is breeding like just not happy players and just really whiny players, and it kind of goes hand in hand with why they can't win in the cold and stuff. Like
And
it's really
as wrestling, if you're a wrestling fan, I'm going to go with Miami is SAWFT, soft. Remember Enzo Amore and Big Cass? I'm sorry.
I do. I actually remember that one, but that was back when even I watched wrestling a little
Yeah.
more. So
So like they are really, really, really soft. Like they didn't like to be. It was almost like when Eric Bieniemy was the offensive coordinator for Washington, and they were all mad. Their offensive players were mad because he actually made them practice hard, and they didn't want to be coached hard. Well, and Fangio probably wanted out. Fangio would have been the Eagles' defensive coordinator anyway if it wasn't for that scumbag Jonathan Gannon bailing on us after the Super Bowl. If he would have just let somebody know, Fangio wouldn't have went to Miami, and he would have been the defensive coordinator last year, and maybe our defense wouldn't have crapped the bed at the end of the year last year. And imagine what the defense would look like now in a second year of Fangio's defense. Now he gets to expand on this going into next year with all these young guys. It should, in theory, it should get better and better and better. And that's scary because this is in the first year under Fangio, this is the number one ranked defense. The Eagles went from 30th to number one. Like I don't know if that's ever happened before.
no, it's huge. Like the biggest jump for a defense in between seasons. I mean, I'd be interested to see that as well. I mean, you can see like going from the 30s into the going into like the mid-teens, the middle of the league, but to go all the way from 30 all the way up to one is wild. Tech says they don't call the PI when an interception happens in front of it. I mean,
Vaughn ran right through him. Like that could have been,
oh, yeah.
should have been a PI. He was trying to come back to it, and Vaughn restricted him. So
I mean, I'm not gonna lie because
by the letter of the law, it should have been. And Goddard's definitely was a PI.
Yeah, yeah. So San Diego 2019 says being that they didn't call PI on 33 all over Goddard's back, I don't mind the no call for Bond. I'm gonna give the refs credit on one thing. They did throw a fair amount of flags. I think it ended up being like 14-ish between the two teams, but they let the guys play for the most part, and you're not seeing that they. I don't believe the referees influenced the result of this game like we've seen in some other games this season where it's clear that there was an influence on the decision based on some calls that referees made at certain points in the game. I don't think that if you add some of these calls into the mix that it was really making a dramatic difference. That was Jordan Love's final hurrah Hail Mary, and instead you put them on the 1 yard line, still needing to score twice. Was it really going to make a difference on the game? Probably not really. So I was pretty happy with the way that they did they miss calls on each side of the ball? Absolutely. Did they make some good calls on each side of the ball? Absolutely. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think it was, I watched some of the games throughout the weekend, and there was way worse calls being made, and calls that influenced
They
games more
missed a
than
lot of
this.
false
So
start penalties on Green Bay's tackles too. They were blatant. It was so frustrating. Tex Quentin says maybe Fangio benefited from a fresh start and a better team, and he's a big Phillies fan. So like he started his coaching career in Philly and with the Philadelphia Stars in the USFL. So this is where he wanted to be, and this is where I don't foresee him going for a head coaching position. Like at his age, he kind of want to finish his career here, and hopefully we can get a nice transition from him to whoever the next defensive coordinator could be, and kind of keep everything if the defense continues to play well. But yeah, I mean, this is, again, I said it, Fangio would have been here after the Super Bowl year if Gannon didn't screw the Eagles over. Like if he all he had to do was make it known that, look, I'm going to become a head coach, and Fangio would have never taken the Miami head coaching job. He was here helping already. He was on the staff, and it could have just been a smooth transition from Gannon to Fangio, but nope, Gannon had to screw us over. Brett Eclipse says, alternatively, conversations might need to be had about Kellen Moore, who, speaking of, is apparently being strongly linked. Good. Let him go. So
this would end up making it.
When it came to the passing game, it felt like it was all vertical stuff. It took a bunch of routes, a bunch of patterns that were taking long developing, and there were only a couple of plays that Jalen was able to get the ball out quick, but a lot of them were all like, let's try to get the ball down the field. And I did not like that one bit, especially with a quarterback coming back missing 3 weeks, coming back off of concussion. Let's get short, quick passes to get them in the rhythm, which I felt like they did early, but then everything seemed like it was going downfield.
Yeah, the whole strategy of that game, the whole play calling seemed so off after like the first, really was more like the first couple of offensive possessions for the Eagles. It just did not look like, it looked like such a weird game plan for Jalen Hurts. It did not look like the Jalen Hurts game plan that you had been calling all year in favor of it. Like it felt like it was for a pocket passing quarterback like a Dak Prescott or Jordan Love. And Party on Broad said earlier, Kellen Moore's game plan was mind-numbingly bad yesterday. It's so frustrating. It was. He's done a good job as a play caller for the most part this year. This had to have been one of Kellen Moore's worst. Did he think he still had Tanner McKee throwing the ball? This was Jalen Hurts coming back, and maybe it was meant to protect Jalen Hurts from running the football by making these long developing plays. That he had to throw the football and not leave the pocket and abandon the pocket. But still, you have to expect that you're going to eventually need to have Jalen Hurts use his legs. So I hope Kellen Moore learns from this game that game plan is not going to work.
Facing the Giants and the Cowboys defenses, which are bad. Green Bay has a good defense. Like maybe he just thought, hey, like we did well the last couple of weeks. We'll keep that same game plan. But you're going up against a much better defense. Dallas and the Giants suck. Their defenses are terrible. That's why you were able to beat them with Tanner McKee. So, excuse me, that you need to realize the personnel you're going up against. And the fact that, and I don't know if this is an offensive coordinator thing or if this is a Jalen thing, but that one play that was under center was the first time in Jalen's career that he did not, that from under center, it wasn't a play action pass. It was a straight drop back up from under center. And I think he hit Devontae Smith for 10 yards or something. That's the first time in his career that ever happened. I couldn't believe it when I saw that. How does a quarterback go 4+ years, 5+ years, and not have a play from under center that's not play action? And it's took this long. It was crazy to hear that.
Yeah, that is a wild stat. And this is the only thing I'm going to agree with Cameron on this point. Only reason I don't want Kellen to go is because I feel bad for Jalen having to adjust to another coordinator, gone through 10 since college. This would be his, if they moved on from Kellen Moore, or if he ended up going and getting a head coaching job, this would be his 5th in 6 years as a starting quarterback.
In the NFL. In the NFL. He's had since high school, one I guess go 2 years, I guess, that he's had the same. And that was Shane Steichen from 21 when Shane Steichen took over about halfway through the year to 22 when we went to the Super Bowl. Like, so I agree. Like, if Kellen Moore can come back or does come back, having that continuity on the offense, and maybe you can expand on some of the stuff that he does offensively, that would be good for Jalen. But I think Kellen Moore is good as gone. I think he's going to be the Dallas head coach. Like, let's be honest. Who can put up with Jerry Jones? I don't think Deion's going to want to do it. Ben Johnson's not going to want to do it. And Jerry's going to want somebody that he can puppet, and I think that can be or will be Kellen Moore.
Yeah, and I mean, they missed the boat, obviously, on interviewing some people because they waited and were trying to negotiate with McCarthy, and they couldn't agree on the length. So obviously McCarthy probably wanted like 5 years, and they wanted to go with 2 or 3 years. They wanted him to prove himself more. And he said, I got teams interested. I had people requesting me for interviews, and he rejected it. So, but I agree with you. Kellen Moore seems like more of the fit compared to some of the other guys. Like Ben Johnson wants more control in an organization. They missed out. They wanted to interview Johnson and Glenn, but Johnson was never going there. Johnson would never go to Dallas, other than the aspect that it's, Dallas, the most valuable football franchise in the NFL, and blah, 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 blah. But no, it just doesn't make it doesn't make sense for Johnson to go. There's way better opportunities for Ben Johnson to go to. Kellen Moore does make the most sense. They got behind the 8 ball, and everyone was saying, Jerry must have a plan if things aren't going to work out. It doesn't seem like he actually has a plan. It seems like he's going flying off of his seat with this one, and we're going to see they're probably going to overreact to a coaching hire and make a bad decision. I feel like there's a reason Kellen Moore hasn't gotten hired through the past, 4 cycles that he's been interviewed for almost every head coaching opening. It was kind of like the whole Eric Bieniemy. I think Brian Daboll for the longest time struggled to get a job. It just feels like eventually you give the opportunity just because, okay, well, we're out of options. Let's give Kellen Moore this opportunity. I feel like there's a reason he hasn't gotten a head coaching job. And one where he can be puppeted, like as you say, may just be the one that Kellen Moore finally finds getting that head coaching job.
I mean, he's used to that locker room. He's used to Jerry Jones. He played there. He played with our coach, Dak Prescott. So who knows? But again, I don't think Deion he signed the number 1 quarterback to go to Colorado. So I don't think he would leave there this year, maybe next year. But who knows? I'm just thinking off the top of my head. I don't know. It's going to have to be somebody familiar with that franchise. And again, the only name right now is Kellen Moore. I wonder, maybe, do you think Doug Peterson would go there? That would be interesting. Let's see. There was one.
Cameron Crawford looked it up. Google AI says 7 different offensive coordinators in 8 years going back to his senior year at high school. That would make sense.
Well, I know, because at Alabama he did have Daboll. Did he have Sark? I don't remember if he had Sark or not, or Lane Kiffin, whatever, and or Bill O'Brien. I think Bill O'Brien was there, and then he went to Oklahoma, and then with the Eagles.
So he's on 4 in Philly, 2 in college, 1. Yeah, it would be 7. 2 in college, 1 in his senior year of high school. So 7 in 8 years.
Yeah, it's definitely crazy. Devontae says whoever we play between the Rams and the Vikings, we got to get AJ and Smitty more involved. I agree with that, but also I'm at the point now. It's playoffs. It's survive and advance. I don't care if it's 3-2. I don't care if it's 40-38. I don't care how it gets done. Win the game. And Devontae also mentioned as long as Jalen doesn't turn the ball over, we win. I feel at least yesterday, and it even happened against was it Carolina? Sometimes Jalen gets gun shy, and he doesn't want to turn the ball over. It felt like it was kind of pounded into him, hammered into him. Look, don't turn the football over. You don't turn the ball over, we win, type of deal. And that's why there sometimes he doesn't make passes that other quarterbacks would make. But Justin Herbert threw 4 interceptions? He's not in the playoffs anymore. Jordan Love threw 3 interceptions. He's not in the playoffs anymore. I don't care what Jalen does. And I do think Jalen will be better next week. Like, obviously, coming off of a concussion, he kind of just had to get back into the rhythm, get back into the motion of it. And he's back into that game speed. I also don't think that whatever defense they're going to play next, whether it's the Rams or the Vikings, is going to be as good as Green Bay's. But I do think the Vikings defense is going to be Brian Flores is going to bring the house. So I hope that Kellen Moore, like on the Goddard touchdown pass, the Packers had 7 guys at the line of scrimmage and brought all 7. And I love that they finally had the outlet. They had the quick play, get the ball into Goddard's hands and let him make a play, and he scored a touchdown.
Almost didn't end up a play at all because the pass was way off.
It wasn't a great pass, but I want to see more of them. And if they're able to do that, and because Flores, if it's the Vikings, he's gonna bring pressure, he's gonna try to come after them. It's almost like a Todd Bowles thing. And I'm kind of glad. I mean, I didn't want Washington to win. I don't want Washington to go like far, but like I'm glad it's Washington. Or I'm glad Washington won in the sense that we're not facing the Bucs this week. But Flores could kind of be like Bowles in that matter, that like he might not be the Jalen Tamer, but like he's going to bring pressure and he's going to force you to make up your mind really quickly, make your mind up quick and make a play. Or, and if that happens for a quarterback that's not used to making plays quick, that can force turnovers potentially.
Yeah, I mean, it's good that we didn't go up against a defensive coordinator who brings a lot of pressure. If we ended up against a Tampa in his first game back from being in the concussion protocol, that would have been scary with Jalen Hurts. If we had to face, like you said, a Brian Flores, like Minnesota Vikings team, that would have been scary because like coming off the concussion protocol and with Jalen Hurts' history of how he does against pressure, a lot of blitzes like that. You didn't want that type of scenario. So I guess from a player's perspective, the Green Bay Packers have a really good defense and they were missing Jair Alexander for one. So like they were still missing a really top player. But from a strategic scheme standpoint, it was the right matchup for Jalen Hurts to get comfortable and get back into a game speed and game rhythm. Devontae said the passing game got to be quicker and Jalen needs to release the ball a lot faster. Definitely, we talked about that. We talked about Kellen Moore's play calling. It was really not that great, especially for Jalen Hurts. In any case, Jalen Hurts throwing a deep ball like that or just long drawn out plays, it just isn't something that Jalen Hurts is good at doing. So definitely agree on that point. Reddit Clip says, who are we rooting for tonight? Rams are probably the easier opponent, but we're 4-0 against the Vikes in the playoffs, and 3 of those times we went to the Super Bowl afterwards. You're on mute.
My bad. Before so I'm trying not to have my cough go over. Before we finish off, we'll give our quick prediction for that. So we'll answer that question. We'll answer before we head off within the next 5-10 minutes.
Definitely. Couple more comments here. Wonder if Kellen even wants the Cowboys job. I don't know if Kellen Moore and Dak Prescott even like each other, and if he thinks that Sirianni micromanages.
I think they do like each other.
It's tough to say. I don't think it's that they don't like each other. The scheme just stopped working for Dak Prescott. It started to not work for Dak Prescott.
I think it was a Mike McCarthy thing. Mike McCarthy wanted Kellen Moore wanted to be he wanted the passing offense. They wanted to throw the ball. McCarthy wanted to run the ball, and McCarthy, being the head coach, won out. And so I that's what I think it was. It was a philosophical difference between McCarthy and Moore. I don't know if Dak had anything to do with that.
And I think Kellen Moore wants a head coaching job. If the head coaching job that he's going to get, there's a big pay difference between offensive coordinator and head coach. And once you get into being a head coach, we've seen head coaches who don't deserve to be head coaches again become head coaches again. Once you get there, you're seen as a head coach and you're going to be provided more of a leash and more of an opportunity. So I think Kellen Moore wants a head coaching job, and if it just happens to be the Cowboys,
there's only 32 head coaching jobs in the world, like 2
exactly.
So at least to get the opportunity to do it, you'd want to do it. And obviously has gone after or done interviews, so he has some type of proclivity, or he wants to have ambition, I should say, to try to get a head coaching job.
Definitely. Texas, Minnesota's the best defense remaining. I hope they lose tonight. And happy Tampa Bay is out. We're all happy Tampa Bay is out. We never want to have to face Tampa in the playoffs because it just seems like they have the Eagles' number, or at least Jalen Hurts' number. I don't. If it's a different quarterback, do they have the number the same way they have Jalen Hurts' number? I don't know. But yeah, we're all happy Tampa Bay is out. Brett Eclipse says, I found Hurts' recognition of the blitz and the adjustment call for a blitz beater to be really impressive on that Goddard touchdown. We definitely agree.
Did say that was Hurts making the adjustment. So he has it in there. We know he can do it. We've seen him do it periodically. We saw him do it against Pittsburgh this year. Had a good game against Cincinnati. We saw him go step for step, and I know it was a couple years ago, but go throw for throw, step for step with Mahomes in the Super Bowl. He has that in him. But like, you have the best. You're gonna have the offensive player of the year. You have the offensive player of the year in your backfield. He could have had 170 yards rushing yesterday. He decided to slide early, which his explanation was pretty funny. He's like, I'm not going to pull a hammy. It doesn't make sense for him to pull a hammy, or for like if one of the offensive linemen was running with him, for them to pull a hammy. Get the win, go down. Let's get out of here and get ready for divisional round next week.
Agree. You could tell that Green Bay was getting chippy too, and you didn't want to put yourself in any situation because another play, like, a point after, a kickoff, like those types of plays are just setting yourself up for Green Bay to go over the top, and you definitely don't want that. So.
And when they I think it was number 93, I forget what his name was.
It was
for Green Bay, but when he threw down and had that penalty, he threw down Saquon. First, it was Jalen that got in his face, and then you saw 3 offensive linemen come up. Like, this team, it's the brotherhood, the camaraderie with this team is so much different than last year. Like, this team enjoys being around each other.
Oh, definitely. And like we said earlier in the season, it seems like maybe Hassan Reddick might have really just been the poison of it all, because then look, he goes over to the Jets. He's out of shape. He doesn't perform anywhere close to what they were expecting. And I mean, Howie seemed to kind of saw the writing on the wall and the future with that, which is impressive. Cameron says Prescott was upset about him leaving. It was him and McCarthy, just like you said, LJ. The philosophical difference between Kellen Moore and McCarthy's offenses and how they wanted to call plays. And we all know McCarthy wanted to be the play caller again. Let's just face it. He
lied to Jerry Jones, talking about how when he was on his little sabbatical after he got fired from Green Bay, he was in the lab looking up all these different offenses, and his offense was still stale. Everything was still the same. He didn't adjust. He lied about it. And if he's going to go and be the Bears coach, let him stale up that fraud Caleb Williams as well. Brett Eclipse says, this reminds me of Trent Williams throwing hands with Eagles players toward the end of the Niners game, getting demolished. Yeah, he tried to go after who was that? Was it Nakobe that he tried to go after? And then Ndamukong Suh came up and he was like, all right, yeah, I don't want nothing to do with you. Like, he was trying to go after somebody smaller than him, and then Suh came up to his face and he's like, yeah, I'll back up. I ain't gonna do anything. Again, Trent Williams is, talk about a fraud of a player. Trent Williams, he's such a he can only pick on somebody smaller than him, but when somebody his own size comes at him, he's a little punk ass bitch.
So, any other final? Jordan Love is. I like Jordan Love. He's a bit overrated. Obviously,
did you hear Ron Jaworski said? Ron Jaworski had said that last week. That he's like, he literally called Jordan Love overrated, and I was shocked that I was shocked that Jaws would say that about Love. Like, Love, I don't think he's like a top 10 quarterback, but I didn't know if I would use the word overrated, but again, like he hadn't thrown an interception in over 170 passes, and he threw 3 against the Eagles. Like, this Eagles defense is really good. So like they deserve a lot of credit for the pressure that they were able to put on them, and I guess, and I will also say this: not having Christian Watson, Reed got hurt, Wicks I think got hurt, did Dobbs get hurt? Like they were down on the fourth down play. He threw it to some guy I've never heard of, and he couldn't get his foot in bounds.
It was to Malik Heath, yeah, and he didn't realize
They were down. They were literally down to
their
last four receivers on the depth chart. So like, I do think that if they had one or two of their starting receivers, maybe it would have been a little bit more competitive for their offense. But you got to play with who you got to play with. Everybody's dealing with issues this time of year, so that's where the Eagles deserve a lot of credit.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to remember, because I think that the Green Bay Packers sometimes they get, like, they lost to some of the best teams, but they're also the youngest team in the NFL. Still, the average age of this Green Bay Packers team is like 25 years old, 26 years old. Exactly. So I think we have to remember, like, get in some, and it's great that you have that core, that youth core, but I think Green Bay's sticking to that core youth and hoping that they all just develop without much of a veteran presence. And I think that it would do them a lot of justice to bring in a veteran wide receiver, maybe a veteran offensive lineman, a couple veteran defensive players, not to take away from them, but
Davante Adams is going back.
Oh, well, get him away from get him away from Aaron Rodgers, and then the whole environment that was going on in Vegas. Like he could. I don't necessarily believe he's a problem in a locker room. So I mean, there's a chance, like, the right guys in place who don't really have big egos that are willing to help this Green Bay Packers team go to the next level. And Jordan Love, like the Devontae says here, Love is very streaky ever since last season against the Cowboys. The media put a high pedestal. The media puts a high pedestal on so many. Like, look at CJ Stroud. Like, he was put on this massive pedestal.
Justin Herbert,
Jaden Daniels this year. Like, we still have to see more from Jaden Daniels. Like, what's next year going to look like?
Nix will be next.
Bo Nix, yeah. Like, all of these guys are on, like,
and then people want to talk down on Hurts, who all he does is win. I don't care how he does it, and he doesn't even care about his stats. All he wants to do is win, and that's what this team does. Him and Sirianni together, like, all they do is put up W's. Obviously, the last 7 games of last year was bad, but that was more of a locker room thing than anything. But like, they know how to bring a team together. And that's what we've seen this year. And and the one thing I like about Sirianni is he will adjust when it needs to be adjusted. He'll listen to leaders. He'll listen to other people. Like, obviously the final decision is his, but he's not going to, it's not going to be like Chip Kelly. He's not going to micromanage it. He is going to listen and figure out what's best for everybody around, not just what's best for him. And that's why, like, at their bye week, they changed up the offense and went to more running style, and it's helped. When they feel like they need to be in pads late in the season, they go in pads. It's helped. That's why this team is so physical. And that's why this team is playing at a very, very pretty high clip right now. And a lot of people call them the best team potentially left at least in the NFC in the playoffs.
Cameron says Green Bay needs to make a move in the wide receiver room, like how he did bringing in AJ. Instantly improves their offense. I agree. I like Christian Watson. He's very injury prone. I like Jaden Reed, but you can see there's and maybe they go with the streakiness of Jordan Love, but these aren't guys who are like an AJ Brown, Davante Adams, like, that are going to be consistently, you can lean on to put up, 12, 13, 1,400 yards. They're just not those guys. So it'll be interesting to see what type of move Green Bay makes, because bringing in Josh Jacobs was great. Such a smart move for their offense. Now they just got to continue to make that.
He's physical. His touchdown, well, it wasn't a touchdown run. Where he got down to that was one hell of a run by Jacobs.
He was the most physical player on that Green Bay team. He was the only one bringing any type of physicality for that Green Bay team.
Easily.
Agreed here. Media loves a shiny new toy. They will always put the hot new guy on a pedestal just to tear them down the next year. Listen, I agree. The media just wants to be right. So if they can sit there and they can hang their hat on someone and follow along until they're wrong, they're definitely going to do it. Cameron says winning percentages is the only stat Jalen cares about and Nick cares about. That's why I think they're an amazing pair. Agreed. And I think that, like,
just win, baby.
there's one Super Bowl. To expect that you're gonna be like, the New England Patriots. The New England Patriots was once in a lifetime. That type, I guess we're kind of seeing it with the Chiefs again. But to think that there can be multiple of these teams winning back-to-back Super Bowls, that just does not happen. You just don't see that. So like the Eagles winning, get into the playoffs, having chances at the Super Bowl, we should take as a positive. You're not going to go on this run and at the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl every single year. It just doesn't feel realistic. And it's only becoming harder in the NFL. Makes it even more impressive what the Kansas City Chiefs are doing. But then again, you watch some of those Chiefs games and you see that they're getting quite a bit more help than Tom Brady and Bill Belichick even got in their time. So
Cameron says the Hurts top 7 winning percentage out of all QBs ever, minimum 50 starts. Nick top 5 winning percentage as a head coach. Perfect pair. Again, all they care about is winning. All I care about is winning. I don't care how it's done. The Eagles O-line showed how pissed off they were with the all-pro snubs. They proved something with how they were blocking yesterday. Brenna Clip says they definitely played with a chip on their shoulder, and they're going to need to against a couple of good defenses coming up, whether it's the Vikings or the Rams. We know we've seen the Rams before. I mean, and Saquon had over 250 yards rushing, but Jared Verse, Brandon Fisk, they have a physical line, and the Minnesota defense is pretty good too. So yeah, I mean they're definitely going to have to continue to play up to their par, to continue to progress and get to the NFC Championship game and potentially beyond.
Yeah, and Texas disagree. This passing attack is not good. I mean, ask Pittsburgh. It's just a lazy media narrative and storyline to roll with. When Jalen Hurts doesn't go for 20 completions and 250 yards and 3 or 4 touchdowns through the air, the passing attack isn't good.
He had 2 touchdown passes.
He did. He still did extremely low. His rate.
I didn't know
he had a 111 rating.
The way people talk about the passing attack and all that, I didn't know rushing touchdowns and passing touchdowns were different point totals. I'm sorry. I don't care how it gets done. Rushing touchdowns are fine with me. Passing, I don't give a crap. We're at the time of the year where all these stats don't matter. Win the game in advance. Survive in advance. Get to the Super Bowl. That's all that matters. And I don't care how it gets done, as long as it happens. I still have faith, and I said this before the Pittsburgh game. I have faith that if Jalen needed to go out there and get into a shootout with somebody, he can do it. He just hasn't had to. So again, what is the point of doing something that you don't have to? Why put that out there when you don't have to? When the time comes, he will be able to do it. Will it be this week, whether it's against Minnesota or LA? Maybe. Will it be next week against potentially Detroit? Maybe, but I have faith that he will be able to.
Absolutely. I agree.
It's so annoying. I'm sorry. All right.
It is.
Before we here we go. Okay.
Let's wrap it up. Who are we rooting for tonight?
I think the Eagles can beat both teams. I don't think Sam Darnold can come into the link in potentially bad weather, snow or rain on Sunday, and beat this Eagles defense. I don't think and we know what happened the last time Minnesota came here, NFC Championship game in 2017, and they got destroyed. I feel like that's the link is going to be crazy on Sunday. They beat the Rams. I think the easier opponent is probably the Rams, but I want Minnesota in here. I don't think Sam Darnold can beat the Eagles. I really don't think that can happen. I think the Vikings defense is better than the Rams defense, but I think that the Eagles defense and both teams have great sets of receivers: Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams, Aaron Jones. Like, both offenses are good. I just don't see either team coming in here and beating the Eagles, but I would like to see Minnesota come to Philly.
Yeah, no, I'm going Minnesota as well, because we saw in a pressure cooker moment, Sam Darnold folded in Detroit when everything was on the line for the number 1 seed. he folded. He did not look good in that moment. And outside, like throw in the weather element, throw in it's Philadelphia. No disrespect to the Detroit fan base either, because they're a rabid fan base and they're finally getting to a point where they've been waiting to get to for years. But throw in the weather element, throw in, the number one defense that isn't banged up like the Detroit Lions. There's so many different elements to it. I believe Sam Darnold is fraudulent. I think we both talked about this, and we believe he's fraudulent. And in a big moment like that, he might even choke in the moment tonight. We don't even know, because this is a big playoff moment for him, because he choked in week 18. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens. But I agree. Who are we rooting for tonight? I think Rams might be the easier opponent, but I'm not going to sit there and say, for the longest time leading up to the playoffs, everyone in the media and even us, we were debating who's a team you don't want to see. And in the playoffs, and two of the teams that we said was the Rams and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Those were two of the teams you didn't want to see. The Bucs are a few self-induced mistakes away last night from winning that game, and the doink going in the proper direction. But yeah, of course, it doinked that way for the cardiac commanders, as they're being called. So I'm going for Minnesota for sure too.
Before we finish off, and we may discuss this in the offseason, but Quentin says Foles 2017 over Hurts. That was a 2-game stretch, 3-game stretch if you want to go to playoffs. I will say one thing though. If Foles had to start that entire season, the Eagles aren't the number 1 seed, and the Eagles do not win the Super Bowl if Foles starts from week 1 on. Carson Wentz is the reason we got the number 1 seed. I'm going to leave it at that. Hurts has played this pretty much this entire season minus the last 3 games. He's been a number 1 seed and has gotten to the Super Bowl as a starter for a full season. So, look, it's not a hot take that Foles 2-game stretch, the NFC Championship game and Super Bowl, which is probably the greatest 2-game stretch in franchise history, almost maybe NFL history. Who knows?
I was going to say
that's
NFL,
not a hot
maybe.
take. But Hurts, when you want to take a full encapsulation of it, Hurts is better than Foles. He just had a great stretch. So I'm going to leave it there. We'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks. If we have that discussion in the offseason, we have that discussion in the offseason. But the Eagles are off to the divisional round. They'll face the winner of tonight's Minnesota-Los Angeles Rams game. Connor and I both think we'd like to see Minnesota come to Philly. Sam Darnold is not winning at the link. As always, follow us on Twitter at Kelly Green Hour. Follow Connor on Twitter at Connor10. Follow me on Twitter at LGRaw54. And follow the Eagles Spin Pull Network on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you get your podcasts at Eagles Spin Pull Network. And subscribe, rate everything on the Eagles Spin Pull Network. For Connor, I'm LJ. Thank you all for tuning in to the Kelly Green Hour.